Ryan Goodman just found this. Section 298. Consequently, the court finds that petitioners have established that Trump engaged in an insurrection on January 6, 2021 through incitement, and that the First Amendment does not protect Trump's speech. Secretary, how significant is that line for you? I mean, it is, to me, pretty stunning here. Their whole concern had been, oh, well, insurrection and sedition conspiracy are hard to prove. The judge says in this ruling that they did establish that Trump engaged in an insurrection.
It's really powerful for the entire nation. I believe Trump incited insurrection. There's always questions whether his incitement reached the level of disqualification. And to find a court of law determine that, yes, he did incite the insurrection, I think is important for the entire country. Regardless if Trump is on the ballot or not, he is a danger to American democracy.
We've got some highly anticipated news here on the Colorado lawsuit seeking to disqualify Donald Trump from the ballot based on the 14th Amendment. Judge Sarah Wallace ruled that Donald Trump, quote, engaged in an insurrection on January 6, 2021 through incitement, and that the First Amendment does not protect Trump's speech. However, in the same ruling, she found that the 14th Amendment's insurrection ban does not apply to presidents and therefore rejected the effort to remove Trump from the primary ballot in Colorado. Here's what Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says, quote, no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. Judge Wallace therefore went on to write, after considering the argument on both sides, the court is persuaded that officers of the United States did not include the President of the United States. It appears to the court that for whatever reason, the drafters of Section 3 did not intend to include a person who had only taken the presidential oath. And look, I'm not a constitutional scholar, nor do I claim to be, but the notion that the founders made the conscious decision to exclude the President of the United States from the insurrection clause is absurd on its face. Of course, if you don't want to take my word for it, you can defer to an actual constitutional scholar. Judge Luttig, one of the country's preeminent conservative constitutional scholars, wrote, quote, it is unfathomable as a matter of constitutional interpretation that the presidency of the United States is not an office under the United States. It is even more constitutionally unfathomable, if that's possible, that the former president did not take an oath to support the Constitution of the United States within the meaning of Section 3 when he took the presidential oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution is not a suicide pact with America's democracy. Indeed, it is the very contrary in this instance. It is plain that the entire purpose of Section 3, confirmed by its literal text, is to disqualify any person who, having taken an oath to support the Constitution, engages in an insurrection or rebellion against the Constitution. The former president did exactly that when he attempted to overturn the 2020 election and remain in office in rebellious violation of the Constitution's executive vesting clause, which prescribes the 4-year term of the presidency. And look, I try not to talk out of turn in these videos, but perhaps the judge was looking for an out in what would have certainly been a contentious ruling by prohibiting Donald Trump from appearing on the ballot, and so instead deferred to some tortured interpretation of the text. Again, that's just a guess, but I think it's worth noting. And of course, on the flip side of what Judge Luttig said is Jamie Raskin, another constitutional scholar, and here's what he had to say about Donald Trump's eligibility.
Well, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment provides an automatic disqualification for running not just for president, but any federal office or any state office if you've been an office holder before who has sworn an oath to support the Constitution, and then you violate that oath by engaging in insurrection or rebellion against the Union. And if you do that, you're immediately disqualified for.
But it's never been tested. Am I correct? It's never been tested.
Well, no, I mean, it actually operated after the Civil War. It was put into the Constitution by the Republican Party after the Civil War in order to disqualify people. When the House actually first voted on it, they said they were going to disenfranchise anybody who'd participated in the Confederacy. And when it got over to the Senate, they said that sweeps too broadly. We just want to focus on the worst offenders, people who were actually in office, who swore an oath to uphold the Constitution and then violated it. And even in those cases, we're not going to disenfranchise them and say they can't vote ever again. We're just going to say that they can never hold office again. So I think that this would clearly apply some of the case law indicates that it's self-executing, that it's an absolute bar that the courts can enforce. But it's also clear, and we talk about this in our recommendations, that Congress can act in order to set up a process to make this meaningful. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz and I have introduced legislation to recognize January 6th as an insurrection, and then also to develop a process whereby the Department of Justice could go to the district court in the District of Columbia and have someone declared disqualified from holding office because they had participated in it.
So at this point, whether you're listening to constitutional scholars on the left or the right, what they're saying about Donald Trump's eligibility is beyond clear. Now, for those wondering if this is the end of the road for these legal challenges based on the 14th Amendment, the answer is very likely no. Here's my Legal Breakdown co-host Glenn Kirshner discussing what we can expect next and how this issue will likely still end up at the Supreme Court. Well, does it almost not matter what the outcome is in this case in Colorado, since it's becoming more and more clear that the Supreme Court will be the final arbiter of this decision?
You know, it matters. Here's why it matters. Because the Supreme Court will have to look at the evidentiary record that was developed during the course of the suit. And that's why I think it's important that Crew is bringing a very strong evidentiary case. They're going to put on lots of witnesses. They're going to develop the factual record. And then it is that factual record that will be handed off to the appellate court. First, the appellate courts in Colorado, but then ultimately it will jump into the federal jurisdiction, and it will be decided by the Supreme Court. So I suspect what's going to happen, Brian, is lots and lots of states will have legal challenges brought to whatever it is they decide. If a Secretary of State, for example, decides to put Donald Trump's name on the presidential ballot, then there will be legal challenges brought saying, listen, the Constitution says somebody who engages in insurrection is constitutionally disqualified, so his name can't be on the ballot. So a suit will be brought to challenge that decision. If the Secretary of State opts to leave Donald Trump's name off the ballot, then suits will be filed saying, hey, that's election interference. His name should be on the ballot because there really is no showing that he engaged in or gave aid and comfort to the insurrection. So you're going to have lots of legal challenges brought, I think, regardless of which way each state goes with respect to putting on or leaving off Donald Trump's name. And of course, to see more episodes of the Legal Breakdown, make sure to subscribe to this channel. So while this certainly wasn't the news that we were hoping for with regard to this specific Colorado lawsuit, it'll likely continue to be litigated up to the Supreme Court, which will be the final arbiter of this issue. But regardless of how the Supreme Court ultimately rules, the truth is that we cannot and should not pin our hopes to save us from another Donald Trump presidency on the judicial system. Yes, he should be held to account for his actions, and hopefully that'll come in due course in the courts, but we are immediately responsible for protecting our democracy in the meantime. And so the onus is on us to drive the takeaway home here, which is that the Republican Party's likely nominee has just been found to have engaged in an insurrection against the U.S. government, the same government that he is currently running to lead. This is an enemy of the United States of America, one who very likely wouldn't even be qualified to serve if not for a technicality in the amendment, probably owed to the fact that the drafters of that text quite literally couldn't fathom a U.S. president committing the crimes that Donald Trump just committed. So while we can't control what happens in the courts, and we can't control what specific words in a 150-year-old amendment might offer Trump an out, we can control what we do heading into 2024. We can control making sure that our friends and families and neighbors and coworkers know the stakes in this election and have a plan to vote. We can make sure that they know that even a judge found that Trump engaged in an insurrection against our own government. And we can make sure that we stay informed about what's happening in this country, because one party is relying on your ignorance to feed you disinformation, and it's not the left. We should elect a president who wants to lead this country, not one who is just found to be leading an insurrection against it. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to the channel and do your part to help grow the progressive media ecosystem. I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, I won't ask for money, but just subscribing to this channel goes a really long way, and it helps get the message out to more people. The subscribe button is right here on the screen. You can also subscribe to my Spanish language channel, which I made to reach those crucial Spanish-speaking voters. That link is on the screen too. And finally, if you want to listen to my audio podcast, you can follow that link as well. Thanks so much for watching.